haven't done a lot of sort of teaching courses as such, and doing the fundamentals course last semester was really helpful for me, in terms of sort of structuring my teaching a little bit more, and being a bit more imaginative, I guess, with what I'm doing in the classroom. So I'm looking forward to this semester.
Thanks, Ed. Do you know the other?
No.
Steve, I think you're in art school, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'm film and TV,
right,
but I'm on Cumberland Street,
I'm Grant from Carpentry over in L Block.
Cool.
And Rhea and Ed was together in fundamentals.
Hi, Rachel.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how you going? We're just doing a bit of a round robin to introduce ourselves, just considering there's probably only two that have known each other from previous courses. So over to you.
I'm Rachel. I teach within the horticulture program in Central Otago. I find this video thing really weird. I don't like looking at myself.
You look great.
I've kind of jumped around. I've done the, I think, assessment after this one, and now I'm going back. I think that's the case. What else? I look after the distance program, so I've got quite a few learners that are out in the horticulture industry, studying diploma in Hort, VIT, or level 4 Hort. So, yeah, all over the show.
And you can tell us about wine country for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you find the distancing with them all? Do you find that it's a little impersonal, or have you sort of?
Many of them, most of them are in the local industry, so they are sort of within a probably 25-kilometre radius of Cromwell. So it is. I'm pretty good at going out on site and visiting them, and they come and jump into our full-time program every now and then. So no, I find it great actually. I love that they all sort of already know their stuff. They just pulling it together really with their learning, and I love watching them progress. From just watching their confidence grow over the 2 or 3 years it takes them to do the course. It's just so rewarding. It's good.
Yeah, well, that's what I've sort of discovered now. Coming across the third-year students, and it's just like a light bulb goes on, doesn't it?
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Now I've got likes of young guy who started with me, had no confidence whatsoever, and he's been working within his job and learning so much along the way. He now texts me and said, when he's going for job interviews and things like that, and lets me know beforehand, and then he's just got himself his first sort of assistant manager's job, and he's just thrilled, and he'd like first to call me up and say it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's neat. That closes the loop, doesn't it?
Oh, it's cool. Makes it all worthwhile. Yep.
So, you may be aware that you've had a change of tutors. Julia took the workshop that yourself and Stefan were in July. Julia's just on some extended leave at the moment, so you've got Bronwyn and I. To look after you. Bronwyn taught this last term, sort of term 2 of semester 1
last year.
So I won't be here at the tutorial next week. Bronwyn will be taking it because I'd already planned to go up to Auckland to see family. So touch base, with Bronwyn or Bronwyn and I. We're both here to support you through the learning design. So good fun. So the first part of learning design that we're really kind of looking at is almost just revisiting where we were with the fundamentals, and when we think about, and also with what you did as well with facilitation when I assessed you up in Cromwell, we're thinking about our lessons and what we're going to be delivering as content, and who are these people that we're actually delivering to. So for those that have done the fundamentals and moved on to facilitation, every time you do a teaching observation and every time that you're in your lessons and developing and planning, you're thinking about, who am I developing to? I'm developing to. Can I get you to record?
I am.
Oh, you are, great.
Am I not?
No, you are. you're thinking about your learners, you're thinking about activities, that are going to stimulate your learners, you're thinking about the pace of your lessons that's suitable to your learners. So I sent out a wee intro brief as to what we'll be looking at in the tutorial this week, and said, could you bring some information about your learners, a bit of a learner profile. And I thought if we just share some characteristics of those learners, see what some commonalities are, see what some differences are, and then this may lead us into a discussion about diversity and what this is and why we need to be thinking about it, when we plan a lesson, but furthermore, when we plan a chunk of lessons, and a bigger aspect that we're going to be looking at, within learning design, because we're taking that step now from really, looking at the lessons that we teach every time to what's a whole chunk of learning, and how do we make that fit into a sequential, logical, feasible and easy to digest bunch of learning. So what have we got with some of our learner profiles? Anyone want to share some aspects that they have found from a current or previous?
With the carpentry, we get a very diverse range of people, judging from the reasons that they want to be there, from being dad thinks it's a good job to have, to them wanting to be there, sort of thing. So the biggest problem that we will strike is some of them may be very, very intelligent, but they can't take it from here to their hands. And that is where we struggle a lot with, because we're a 50-50 course where we're 50% practical, 50% theory sort of thing. So we've got to be able to get them to, like in some cases, some of them have never even held a hammer.
Okay.
And they want to be a carpenter type thing. And I attribute that down to what I call space invaders. Everybody wants to play on computers these days, and because they're there, but back in my day when I was a kid, we were out climbing trees, making huts, and doing all this sort of thing. So we actually had that little bit of knowledge already. So we've got to try and reprogram them, I think, if that's not reprogram, that's a bad word, I suppose. Encourage them to start using their hands, but not to be so frustrated because they can't do it. And a lot of them we find in our, because we have our courses broken down to groups A, B, C and D as we go through. By B, they realise that it's not quite for them. And that is the hardest time, trying to keep them engaged, because they're falling further and further behind in their own mind. So they've got some really self-doubts that they can't they can't cut in a straight line, they can't hammer that nail in. So we've got to sort of encourage them. You'd probably notice that with the foundation.
Yeah, definitely.
Same sort of thing, but we're just that, so you understand fully what I'm saying there.
Level 4, so I get exactly the same halfway through the year. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or oh, this is much more work than I thought it was going to be, or much more, I've got to put more practice in, and then they probably want out by that time, which is why the new level 4 courses are 60 credits, I reckon.
Yeah, true.
It's a good kind of.
So in saying that, it's nothing to do with their culture, whether male or female, because we have a lot of females coming through. It just comes down to the fact that a lot of people just have not had that hands-on,
tactile,
hands-on type thing, sort of thing. So that's where we notice it. Well, I notice it the most in the carpentry. So.
Great. You've brought up some really important words, which is fantastic. So nice segue, because I'll be delving into a couple of words that you've specifically said. So nice, thank you. I just want to share what they're...
you covered quite a lot, but thinking about that, my group, a lot of them have quite a fixed mindset, and that what they know is sort of what they know. So we're trying to expand, make it more of a growth mindset, so that they're not so stagnant and resistant and reluctant to learn. And a lot of them come from very diverse backgrounds, particularly sort of a lower socioeconomic sort of background. carried a lot of life, weight. They've had to take on huge responsibilities for the family. We also have quite a big cohort that had come from corrections, so some of them have been in there for about 20 years, and they come out into this world, this whole new, everything's changed so rapidly. So they, they're generally, they want to learn. That is the best thing about this group, is that they want to learn. They want to reprogram, they want to reinvent themselves and come out as, being able to give back to the community. So I really like those learners, actually, because they come up, they attend all the time, their marks are really good, they're always doing more and more research. They just spend the whole time doing it, I guess, because they're so used to 4 walls that they're prepared to spend that time. But our biggest chunk are young people that have gone through the school system, partially gone through the school system, some illnesses, or they've been bullied at school, and so school just hasn't worked for them. So they've sort of missed out on big chunks of school. They'll go back into school, and then the teachers have lost interest in them. So they've just moving on to us, where we take a more of a pastoral role and try and re-inspire them. So we engage, educate, and inspire the younger ones.
I like that.
Yeah, no.
Inspire. I'm going to write that down.
Great. Okay.
Engage,
someone else
educate,
inspire.
That's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. We have that in quite big writing.
I'm just going to underline, because these are a couple of common terms.
I think at our levels, like that level 4 and stuff, as you step up, I think that's where, because things become more specialist and people have done stuff. I think the diverse thing is the big thing for my course at level 4, which have got half the class that have been some kind of prior further education since school, so they understand how to learn, they get it, and the others, the ones that are coming from school, don't get it, they've been told what to do. I think that's about to change. I think that, way high schools are running now is, I think in a couple of years' time we're going to get a bunch of high school leavers that it's quite scary how awesome they might be at some of those skills, because it seems like the school system's changed. And it's, they're talking in a way that we're talking on fundamentals about inclusive learning and diverse. My sons can do projects on Chromebooks or visually or with words or speak to the class, or what he can do it. They can do things in multiple ways, and they have floating desks and tables, and it's all more project based and stuff. So I think that's going to be a massive impact on what we're getting. But I think it seems like the last few years got a bum deal at high school, and they're coming out with no skills. I question what the hell's been going on at most high schools actually of what they've learned.
So do you think then, Stephen, that it's going to make our jobs a lot easier?
I think it's going to make our jobs different, not easier, because they're going to pressure us in another way. I've really got to keep up with, especially in my area where it's changing so rapidly and fast. And, there's my son's 10 now, so there's kids there with YouTube channels already doing weekly kind of vlogs and blogs. So what skill sets they're going to come with soon is quite scary, and what they'll want to do with it. I'm already fighting a battle to keep up this year with the new things that they want to do, the learners.
Yeah, so your PD must be huge.
I don't get any PD. It's on this at the moment, but that's why I've had to dedicate. I have dedicated quite a lot of the last year to catching up, because I felt so out of the loop last year. I felt like 3 years of teaching and I'd stagnated. I haven't moved within my own.
So what do you call, they're tech natives, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's a good word. It's bigger than digital native.
Yeah.
So I'm just about to start a news module where they're making news stories, which is quite hard to get them inspired with news at that age anyway. But one of the things I have to teach in that is how to pick up a telephone and talk to someone to arrange an interview, because their instinct is to go on email or Facebook and message, and the idea of talking to someone in real life or actually turning up in face is so scary. So I actually do a lesson kind of and write them a little script that, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm a student at this course and I'm making a new story. Would it be okay if I spoke to you? No, you actually have to teach them how to do that kind of thing. And they're all sitting there with mobile phones, but they just don't talk.
Losing that.
Social is a big word. Yeah, like social skills both within each other and
social and communication skills, by the sound of it.
Yeah, in real life.
Great. Yeah. Some really good things that you're bringing up there that actually get us thinking. That's massive.
I think I always feel an added advantage in some ways in doing learner profiles because I teach art history and theory within a practical art school. I have available to me studios and students working in studios, and I can visit them and I can find out a lot about them. Because obviously art is an activity where you're getting a lot of your identity in visual form. So yeah, I can gain a lot from that, and you do find pretty diverse interests. I mean, I've just been serial killers and drugs and Marilyn Manson, and it's pretty interesting. And trying to sort of talk her through her essay, and I guess the other interesting aspect of finding out about these students for me is that because they're often primarily visual people, it's precisely my course, the writing and theory, and that's the course that they find challenging. So it's sort of, in some cases, like with the student I've been talking to, it's sort of coming up with ways they can demonstrate their knowledge when they don't necessarily find the basically.
Yeah. More than way, almost that universal design that we did talk about in the fundamentals, isn't it?
Well, that's we're talking about our learners. That for GDT learners, that's one of the things that's important that we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
To offer those different ways of demonstrating, how you're meeting the learning outcomes and presenting the assessments in different ways.
Yeah.
It's really important because everybody has different skill sets. I had someone this morning say, I'm really good at articulating verbally, and I would like to do part of my assessment in that way, and have a conversation. I just like to have that conversation with a facilitator rather than just hand over a written piece of paper.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I've just been having that discussion with a student who's coming back to study, having failed a course in art history in a previous year, and designing a course where she can do like we did with the value conversation, which was actually pretty interesting for me because it did show me that you could do it like that. That would perhaps more suited to these kind of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Rachel?
I don't know if I've just been jotting some notes while I'm listening to you. So an example of a student I've got that I find quite an interesting one to follow through. She's a Māori lady who's around 40-ish maybe. I don't think she's studied much before, though must probably delve into that a little more. She's got a young family and she's a very busy lady. She rushes off to the supermarket at lunchtime to do her groceries and makes the most of every minute she's here. But she enjoys to share with the class. She's got some pretty amazing stories, particularly, stories from her childhood that she's grown up within her culture, which she likes to share, but she's embarrassed about sharing them. But she doesn't realise how much everybody loves to hear them. She often prompts with I've got a stupid question, kind of often, and they never are. They're always awesome questions that we need, and they're always really well thought out. But she's, I think, with what I'm watching from her is the personal challenges that she's sort of facing with doing this course. She's averaging kind of 80%, which she's never done in her life, and she's so proud of that. She's sort of making future plans based on her achievements and what she's learnt, and she gives herself goals. I don't even know if she realises she's doing it. She enjoys the relaxed environment and needs a mentor or a motivator to kind of help her to just double check that what she's doing is right. She's definitely a doer and prefers sort of assessments that aren't complicated, like with an option of videoing an assessment or her being viewed by me doing the assessment. She'd much prefer that one-on-one because that's just she's comfortable with that. I think, what did I write something else? Loves to do things right now, so she'll come up with an idea or she wants to blog something on her blog, but she'll have to do it right now to get it out of her head and down, because I think that busyness of a working mum, sometimes you need to do it right now or it won't get done at all. From experience, I know this. I'm thoroughly enjoying watching her confidence grow. So I think the way we teach her and the way she learns, is making. I think when she gets to the end of this year, she's going to be pretty proud of herself, really. So I think we need to make sure we support all these good things and notice them.
And that's a really good point. It's a good news story, and that does need to be acknowledged. And what I'm hearing from everybody is that, it's all about knowing your learners. You actually know some stuff about your learners, as a group, but you also know about them individually. Which is hugely important when we're designing for student-led learning. Now, the commonalities, there was a lot, and some of the words that did come up were diverse and culture. Oh, sorry, I left you out. Sorry.
That's okay. It's pretty much the same.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
Even though most of my students I would consider them to be homogeneous. They are pretty much all just left high school, graduated from high school. English is their second language, and English is the language of instruction, and they struggle with English. But I guess the same points everybody mentioned is apply to those students. I find the most difficult part of my role is to increase their motivation. I think they're not motivated enough, and they doubt the purpose of why they are studying in English. They kind of want to study in their own language, and that's a problem that I usually have with them. So they're not really very well motivated, and their background, the education system in the high school is not strong enough, so they are struggling with health sciences and with medical laboratory. So
you do teach large numbers too, don't you? How do you find, you've got an idea of the broader group, but what about the individuals? How easy is it to get to know people as individuals?
It needs a lot of time. It's really difficult to actually understand them on an individual basis.
Because how big is your cohorts, your groups?
Not less than 17 to 20 in a class. It can go up to 40 and 50, some classes. Yeah.
I thought you were teaching hundreds at a time, so it's my mistake. I took some other conversation we had another time.
Rarely, but usually 40 and 50.
Oh no, that's right. I've got the wrong end of the totally. It's my assumption of university teaching. I'm thinking hundreds.
Never assume.
No.
So a couple of words that have come up quite regularly is diverse and culture. So we'll have a little look at those more closely. When someone, you've been explaining, some of the demographics of your cohorts, and diversity is part of it. So when we think of diversity, what are some main points that you kind of think of? Are there any particular words that jump into your head about diversity, or is it just so broad that you can't actually put language around it?
It's all the things that make up the difference, whether that's age, gender, backgrounds, prior knowledge, everything, isn't it? It's the whole package in one. Everyone's different, each person is an individual. I think that's the key to diversity, isn't it? That everyone comes and brings their own things and their own ambitions, motivations, desires and whatever to the program.
Good answer.
Because everybody's so diverse, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed within the carpentry thing is they group very, very quickly, and you have your I don't know how you would put it, status in your class. You know, your good ones, you're slightly not so good, and then it works down, and you got the ones that are really struggling. They seem to stick together, the ones that really, really struggle, and that is the biggest problem about how we get and educate the ones up here. That, hey, look, you're in the same class as them, you should be taking them under your wing. I had a classic example last year where I had probably 50% older students to younger students, and some people in the Polytech came through and gave some talks about how to go and apply for jobs and everything like that. Now the older ones absolutely hated it because they already had the life experience, but the young ones sat there that were normally not engaged were absolutely well and truly engaged. So it completely took a flip in the class type thing. You know, usually you were dealing with the ones that want to feed off you and the ones that don't, but it was a complete opposite there, because it was what they were more interested in, sort of thing, because they'd never had someone come into the classroom and say to them, well, exactly what you were saying, how to answer a phone. You know, you tell someone at 30 years old, oh, we're going to teach you how to answer a phone, they're going to go, roll their eyes and probably be looking at the door saying, well, I don't need to be in this class, I can be doing better things. And that's what I was struggling to keep the older ones in the class. They didn't want to even turn up. They thought, oh, if they're coming back, I'm not coming in and wasting my time.
Teaching someone to suck eggs, really, isn't it?
It's that prior knowledge, isn't it?
Yes.
It's really important to get that just right, but it's not always equitable because everybody's got the different.
Yeah. There's a lecturer at Massey University called Nick Zetke, and he's done a lot of research into engaging learners, diversity in the classroom, and he talks about diversity. He talks about it on 3 levels. He actually talks about it on 5 levels, but the 3 main levels are universal, group, and the individual. And then the 5 are a combination between universal and group, and a combination between group and individual. So what I'd actually ask you to do is, let's have a think about what on earth diversity means on a universal, group and individual level, and how can we think about catering for that, when we're designing a chunk of learning. So I'm going to ask you to work in pairs, and Ed, would you mind working with Rachel? Seeing as you're sort of sitting nice and close to the computer. But what I've got is so you can scribble with the pens all over these. And I've just got, define diversity on the level that I give you, and think about, how you're going to do that within your classroom. Okay, how you're going to cater for it. So I'm going to give Mohammed and Ria universal. I'm going to give Grant and Stephen group, and I'm going to give Ed and Rachel individual. So I think, what do we do? 3 minutes?
I can record on that.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. Just an initial brain dump of what this actually is. I don't know, where's it coming through from up there? I'm just thinking where you're beaming in from, Rachel.
I'm looking straight at your side of your face.
I know, because I was going to put Ed to the computer, but realised it could be Ed.
I don't think she can actually see Ed.
Should I swap with you?
Is the invisible Ed coming through?
No. Oh, now you've shifted. Now I can see Trish. What the heck?
How does that work?
Ah,
I understand.
Is it attached to me?
But do you mean like the diversity
that's
of the
weird.
whole class or the
Spooky.
diversity of what?
They're not really a person, though. They don't really exist.
You are invisible.
Who is Ed?
He's got a job down 3
So how do you split
You're back
into
over
giant
there.
groups?
basically is what I do at the moment.
Find what
Actually,
you mean by the
making most of mental kind of
Yes.
And then,
How many universities? How many
Yeah.
universities do we have?
So that's going completely
What are we
different.
distinguishing?
Well, that's up to
Yeah.
sort of really
thing who
thing. So
feels
what
confident
is
in this
diversity
subject.
to you?
Right, so what's that question?
If you know
What would it be
Define
like even
diversity
in the group?
on an
So I've
individual
done this as
level.
our learner
Split
profile.
them up with
So if we
skills as
go,
well.
On an individual level.
I suppose.
What is
and
on a
the other
universal
one
level?
So I guess does that mean that the person's had lots of
Like
different
how
Like
like
gender as well.
backgrounds
New Zealand differ
Did you
from
find
another
that
country,
in
for
your
example?
prior to?
a little bit. A
Um,
little bit. Yeah, all the girls have kind of
yeah.
grouped together.
So it's going to be,
But
I don't know. It's tricky, isn't
I
it?
work in a really
Yeah.
cramped.
Diversity on an individual would be, I mean, for example, we've got a student he's Scottish. He used to be like a deep sea diver,
On Monday,
and he spent his entire life under the sea.
sitting
And now he's come
in
to
little
New
men
Zealand
groups and they're
with
twittering
a
away.
Malaysian family to study horticulture as
Split them all on.
a method of staying in the country. So I guess within him, he's quite a diverse learner in the fact that he's been involved in so many different
To change seats.
parts, different management levels and so on, and now he's studying something
So,
completely
so
different.
when you define it, can we say
Diversity within an
difference
individual.
Twittering away.
and
So I'm
the
gonna
Yeah.
do this project. I'm going to go
I mean, there's
over the
kind
next
of-
4 weeks.
It's sort of like whakapapa, really, isn't it? I mean, where you come from.
Yep.
Giving you a new story to do.
between
You have 3 choices of the way through, and it's time to
And
rein it in.
students.
Yeah.
And then the sort of personal, I suppose, personal interests and beliefs.
So, just what we just put down there seating then, basically. Is that what we're
I suppose I
trying
should
to...
write some of this down.
Yeah.
So I guess the diversity would change, would it, between a 18-year-old school leaver and a 50, 60-year-old person who's decided to retrain? Be quite big.
Right. Yeah.
It would vary a lot, wouldn't it?
For diversity on a group level.
Write some notes in case Trish asks for.
We're defining diversity in 3 categories.
And then basically saying to them, if you want to go and investigate something on your own,
Yeah,
you know
so
that
it's succinct.
you put your headphones
Is
on
it
because they're all sitting on
Oh, yeah.
computers.
So,
I just say you go on your own journey on the computer there.
Yeah, so if you pick it like I
Any
think,
of you that want to
Rachel,
real
you've
basis
given a
knowledge
really
or
good
something,
example
do
already
kind
of
of one-to-one
individual
workshop,
diversity.
come to the
When
front
you were
of the
talking
class
about that
and put it up on the
Māori
big screen
woman,
and do like a split group thing.
is that you
So I know there's going to be people
got to
that
know
just, like,
her somehow really
don't
well
know it, but don't
through, the way she's interacted.
So
Yep.
hopefully when you get
Yeah.
performances,
I think it helps for us if we're doing practical tasks that we can one-on-one have a chat, without prying. You can just sort of ask a few questions and figure a person out sometimes.
Right.
So that's
How you coach them.
you've actually got a character, you've developed a character for a person in a
So
way.
you actually have a character, even though...
If you were telling the story about her, developed her
Or I might
character
split
comes
tasks
through in
some
that.
more advanced tasks as well.
Whereas a group, you might regard a group maybe as more homogeneous
You know, that's from
initially
that
until
formative
you,
level.
it's almost like you have to get to know the individuals to see the group as
Right.
not
in
a
other areas
homogeneous
common.
group.
common, yeah.
Does that make
what
sense?
happens when we
Yeah.
Commonalities.
move forward, isn't it? Yes, we're not working, because sometimes you've got to work at the slowest pace.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to...
Sorry, I'm just drawing a wee picture. So I've got individual in the middle, right?
It's
And
good.
then I've got character, I've got prior background,
no, sorry, we...
IQ, age,
So we're talking about just...
style of learning,
so,
culture, family.
Families in the team.
and then defining there, we're trying to split the groups up by, age.
Yeah. So the other part of it is how you cater for diversity on an individual level.
Different learning styles, different teaching methods.
Yeah.
You need to...
I guess that's it, isn't it? It is
Like we've got women in the past,
catering
you don't want to put them with
in a way that's an inclusive environment.
too strong.
Yeah.
Otherwise they get ridden over and they'll pull on that. Oh, I can't lift this, can you just do
I mean,
it
that's
for
to
me?
do with sort of creating
So it's a matter of
an atmosphere or a
seeking
climate
as well.
where everybody feels like they are catered for.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, being inclusive.
By using different teaching methods, like
Probably not about isolating
group, small group, one-on-one,
Probably like trying.
Yeah.
mind mapping, all sorts of things, I guess.
That's right. So not just doing one
So we're talking about
approach
getting
the whole
them
time.
Yeah, definitely.
letting the faster ones proceed.
Yeah.
Don't hold them back if they.
You need to kind of step back just slightly and think, if you're defining what it means, group diversity means, you look at the group without knowing anything about them. There's some characteristics you can pick off fairly quickly, but other things, if you start categorising people,
That sort of things with teaching as well.
you do it by things like gender,
Microbiology.
Reflective learning, so this is just another version, I suppose, watching a film and then talking about it. I had when I first did my last assessment with Trish, we watched a film and I didn't know how to summarize it, so it wasn't just watching a film. It was a film on how to prune grapevines.
I have to.
I stuck this huge picture of a grapevine on the wall.
Their lives.
I gave everyone a task at the start of it, told them all to
Finding
pick a word and remember what it is, and at the end we played pin the tail on the donkey, really.
Right.
They all had a post-it note and they had to pin the word on the grapevine for all the different terms that we were using, and they all loved it. They started coming up with words that weren't even in the film.
Something related
For a bit of a joke, but it made quite a relaxed environment. It was a bit of a challenge.
Well, I mean, that's right. I mean, that's the sort of learning through doing thing as well, isn't it? That when you're doing something physical in a sense.
It made them think about that movie while they were watching it, as opposed to just sitting there playing on Facebook.
Stories, they're all open stories. So one's going to be about sustainability and one's going to be a very basic kind of event story that I've arranged with marketing. So I've gone through the class and gone like, who could handle, who would be more inspired by doing this slightly more complex subject.
Gets the brain cells working.
They can then help the person who might struggle with the other. So
I think we got quite an easy one. There's a lot of chat going on.
yeah, so I thought of it in a continuum. That's the way
I'll bring it all in, Rachel.
Am I talking to everybody?
Like who's mates?
Not yet.
Well,
Next to
because we're talking, they can't really hear you, so.
I feel loud.
Right, it's too close.
No, you're not.
So I want to change the location of them a little bit, put them in pairs, and say, right, you're now moving desks and you're sitting there for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I've not
What
done.
are some different learning methods that you that you enjoy using?
It's really good because you've been doing it.
Well, one of the things, I guess, because I'm dealing with visual learners, is I try and introduce visual-based activities, drawing or whatever. I mean, I guess a bit like
I think because there's such good talking,
the
I'd
tail on the
actually like
donkey
to
type
get
thing.
everyone just to have a shared discussion.
I'm visual too. I'm a visual learner too, so I need to see a picture of things usually before I can.
Now we're all listening to you, Rachel.
Quick share.
Yeah, so if we can have a quick share, because there was some really good discussion and I don't want anyone to miss out on what others are talking about. There was that initial, what is this? And so what did you come up with? I'll start with the universal group. What is sort of universal diversity and how do we cater for that in the classroom?
So after thinking and talking about it, I think it's trying to have a profile that characterizes a huge group of students and kind of paint them with one brush and distinguish them from others and try to use that in order to promote their learning.
Great. So, and I've seen there that you've got find the common themes, which is very true. It's what you need to do when you're thinking about it on such a massive, high level. You still do need to find common themes or common cultures, common values. Whatever culture means, and we'll look at that. So it's really diversity on the humanity level. It's way up. It's huge.
It's like lumping all the Polytech students together and saying it's universal diversity. Polytechnic students do these things.
Yeah,
exactly. All foundation learners do these things.
So it really removes the individual.
Or all university students are really good at sitting and listening to lectures, something like that.
So the challenge is that, often when you're teaching or when you're talking about, a universal group, is that you're completely missing the individual.
Mm. Yeah, it's a big assumption then, isn't it? That's good.
Groups.
Yeah, we're not quite sure if we hit the mark there now, talking with Bronwyn on that and everything like that, so might have just gone down
Just put a spoke in the wheel.
might have just gone down the wrong path there, because
I think there were some elements of...
we sort of talked about how we could split the groups up to define, to get the diversity to work within each other, so we could put an older person with a younger person, so we picked on age, knowledge, someone that's got the skills, someone who hasn't, so we pair them up. The gender, example I used, we have females in our group. We've got to be very careful that we don't put them with a dominant male who will play the macho man and pick up the heavy stuff and leave the female not to she's got to learn to do that in our trade, sort of thing. And seating, sort of determining where they're going to sit as well within the classroom. And we sort of come up with how to cater for that. We thought of getting smaller groups and letting the faster ones sort of proceed a bit, because we sometimes try to go at the slowest person's level. So we keep the faster ones engaged by just giving them extra sort of little challenges without going too far off the curriculum, I suppose, and just keeping them engaged while we spend a little more time.
I guess groups as well is a morphing thing throughout a program, because each course you do, someone's going to bring a different learning or a different enjoyment to that course. So when I'm doing news stories, there's someone that loves news, and then I do a music video, and there's this person that knows music videos, and so yeah, it's kind of ever evolving, that group dynamic thing as well. And as they get to know each other, they all come in at the beginning of the year, having all been to different high schools, and then they form their little cliques of friendships and stuff. Friendships, I suppose, is a big thing within that group as well, because you're fostering that. People, that's what they're there to do as well, that social aspect. But sometimes that can be a positive and a negative thing as well. So I've reached a point in my year now in my classroom, which is very confined. There's a little clique in the corner that just Twitter the whole time and mucking about's a bit too much.
Twitter or tweet?
Twitter as in
yeah,
and giggling and all that kind of, and it's just kind of, we've reached a point now where it's like there's a bit too much mucking about in the class. So on Monday, I'm about to pair them up into different groups and you all move in desks, for 4 weeks.
You know what you two have done, don't you? You've taken your group and what you know about your individuals in that group, and you're designing learning solutions for them already. So you've already gone the next step. Because how would we define group diversity then? Is it like they're looking at the group in a blanket way, is it?
It's really looking at the members of the group. So it's not down to that individual, and we'll sort of explain it further, but if you look at what makes up that group, members that do make up that group, which is exactly what you were saying. You're by individual cultures or individual characteristics that define that group. So there might be people that you example from a different ethnicity, and so you may introduce yourself or introduce the lessons in their language. You may to bring them all together as a group, to bring those individuals together as a group, something that Bronwyn and I were talking about earlier that is done really well in some parts of the Polytech is, because you've got these learners from different ethnic backgrounds, is that, there's a shared lunch where everyone brings food from their ethnic background, and so you're taking those individuals and bringing them in and making them a group. Sometimes your groups form into your cliquey cultures, and again, you need to break them apart, and sort of individualize that group separation. So, you're trying to bring them back into one group rather than morphing off into individual groups within that group.
But then
it's
also
quite weird, isn't it?
Allowing people, with different levels of knowledge to, the fast learners, you don't want to hold them back, but you've also got to cater for the slower learners. So
always a challenge.
Kind of splitting your classroom and trying, or putting, a general kind of, here's my general lesson and here's a little bit advanced for the ones that want to go ahead, or
all those different ways.
Yeah.
Put the more able learners with the less able learners. Yeah, give them extension activities that the more able learners can go off with, or so they're not sitting there flicking their pens and disrupting everybody.
That doesn't happen.
Ed and Rachel, what did you come up with, your individuals?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, sweet. I disappeared because my battery was going flat, and I'm back now. Where am I? So for individuals, I think we got the easiest one really. We had, I had a wee mind map hidden at individuals in the middle, obviously, and it had character, motivation, prior background, IQ, if that's a word we use, I'm not sure, age, learning style, cultural backgrounds, family background, even mental health background, I guess. So those are all the things, I guess, that you need to think about with an individual if you're teaching an individual learner. We then went on to talk about the things you need for that individual learner. So you need a good inclusive environment, different learning methods within our teaching. So whether it be group, inclusive, one-on-one activities, reflective activities, visual learning activities. There's so many that could be on that list, I guess.
I'm going to flip it round a little bit, Rachel and Ed.
Yep.
And what happens if you've got that one challenging learner in the class that takes all your attention away from the group?
I'll let you go first.
So what happens to the group dynamics?
I like how the person prior, and I'm not sure, sorry about names, said, what did he say? I like how he said let the faster ones proceed and give them extra challenges to keep the slower ones engaged. So somehow you need to split them up somehow to stop that from happening. And I guess it may be, would it be running a tutorial, for example, for that person who is falling behind or standing out without making it uncomfortable for them? But I guess you've got to talk to them in person, don't you, to make it comfortable enough.
Definitely.
Are you talking about someone who's sort of disruptive?
Yeah, what if someone's disruptive? So you've got this whole group that, Stephen and Grant have worked really well. They've sort of drawn them from the universal, made them a group in the classroom, doing that inclusive teaching, and you're thinking about, how you're teaching to meet all the demands of the individuals within the group. And you've got Rhea who throws herself on the floor at every lesson. What do we do? What do we do with Rhea? How do we then? Rhea takes all the attention and is the individual that everybody focuses on to the detriment of the group.
You have to address it. Because the others pay the equal amount of money they deserve, the equal time. I think, I've definitely realised that it's usually the ones that put the least effort in demand the most of your time, because
absolutely
you want to make them pass. So I haven't really had examples of any student turning around. There's been a few mutterings this year. I paid my money and I'm fed up with them mucking about. So you get.
Do you address it outside of the class?
I think so, yeah. You take them aside to certain people and say, come on, your attendance is not good enough if we keep going down this route, or you keep interrupting the class, so it's to the detriment of everyone. You obviously wouldn't do it in an open forum, but...
You can run a voting and put it to the whole group and ask them what they think as well. And if they want to persuade this discussion, or they want to talk about something else, and by this way you can probably... end the whole story in the spot in the class.
You don't want to give too much attention to the disruptive person either, do you?
No, because they could
It's
feed
like
off
training dogs,
We had one last year that we had to exclude from the course because he just pushed the buttons too much, and we were able to pull the safety card. In the end, when he finally threw a chisel, that was enough for me take it to the next level, and have him removed from the Polytech. They gave him the opportunity to leave himself, and they would refund him something or stay and risk prosecution if he keeps going the way he was going. But he was sexually harassing the girls as well in the class, and
Dangerous.
he was just he was very unstable. It was and we had the same thing where the other students were saying, well, I'm paying good money to be here, why am I putting up with this? And then it puts a real strain on, because obviously we don't want to give up on anybody. But there is a point there where, unfortunately, it came out of our hands once we had a health and safety issue. So
you go through student support and do a learning contract or anything before?
I went straight to the head of the school, and then everybody just played their part from there, and so it worked out quite good in the end, and the class came back together, but they were very, very getting divided before then. So.
It's a good illustration of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And also, I remember, studying sort of classroom diversity, years ago, and it was almost I was challenged a little bit with it, and I think this individual aspect of diversity, because you can so focus on an individual that you may see as diverse from the rest of your group, that you actually exclude them by trying to be overly inclusive in a way. And so it's kind of, when you're thinking about your lessons, it's almost, and your planning of sessions, it's probably really trying to meet that group diversity is what we're really sort of aiming for, the whole time that we're thinking, who are our learners? How is my learning design going to best meet their needs? How am I going to ensure that my teaching practices include the guy that's really struggling and the guy that's racing ahead? How do I also make sure that my teaching matches different ethnic groups, different ages? So it's really, it's constantly thinking about what are your activities and what are your strategies through your blocks of learning that are going to keep these different people engaged.
Without shining the spotlight on them individually.
Absolutely.
And so that's your flexibility in your learning design that you have to build in so that it's seamless and it doesn't look like it's special for any particular individual, isn't it?
So we're knowing our students individually, and that's a real benefit. Rather than thinking of them just as mass universal, we're knowing them individually, but we're teaching them as a group.
Yeah, that's
so it's somewhere in between, what these two groups we're kind of talking about is where we want to hit when we're thinking about our learning design. Another thing that has come up in it is culture. And sometimes we think about culture as our ethnic culture. What else do we mean by culture? I mean, when Stephen talked about his tutoring group, that's
a culture.
Yeah, that's a culture.
It wasn't Twitter.
No.
A group of people that have that common goal, that commonality together, whether it be music or dance or language or food or, it just carries on. Different groups, people, and you can belong to a variety of them, not just one culture.
No, absolutely, definitely. You may identify by wearing your rugby shirt or how you celebrate your Christmases. There's all sorts that define what your culture is.
And that's interesting for me. Culturally, I'm very connected to Māori tanga. I can speak the language, and I have Māori children, and do a range of other activities, but I can't connect myself ethnically to that group. So that's that real difference, that definition of culture versus that ethnicity.
And they are quite different.
Very different.
Hugely different. What is culturally responsive pedagogy? What a mouthful. What does that mean? Because if you've had a quick scroll through all the bits that do make up this course on Moodle, there's quite a big section on culturally responsive pedagogies. Has anyone had a squiz through, or are we just going to launch it and then go, what on earth is this?
I think it's very important to try and make the teaching relevant to the culture of the students. I think they will be more engaged and probably more motivated to learn.
Yeah.
If you try to give examples from their own culture, I think it helps, and it's really important. And I try to do that, and it's really important. It pays a lot, I think. Works.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be a quick reference to, if they're right in the rugby culture, it might be a quick reference to the game that's on Saturday night.
Yeah.
But it's drawing what's important.
Yeah, grabs their attention.
Yeah.
But also opening their minds to other cultures and stuff within. Yeah, there might be someone within the class. Just because there might not be a Maori person in the class doesn't mean you wouldn't teach them Maori strategies or kind of things within the class. Or I got my class, we got offered to do an international storytelling festival at the library this year, where people told a story in English and then in their native tongue. So there was a Maori speaker, there was an Arabic speaker, their faces was amazing when the lady, she told this story in English and then she told the story in Arabic, and it was the first time they'd heard Arabic before. And so yeah, just like, and they were all like, wow, that's what just so expanding their minds a bit while they're here as well kind of helps us all, I think.
Absolutely. There's 7 points that make up culturally responsive pedagogy. I'm going to give one to each of you.
Thank you.
Where's Rachel's? Can you see that? No?
Read it to her.
Learning within the context of culture. Okay, what you said. Have you gone quiet?
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a noisy office. I just muted, but it's quiet again now.
Learning.
I forgot that I'd muted.
Oh, that's all right. Yours was learning within the context of culture. So there is more to, you can go through onto Moodle and have a greater read about them. But if you just actually like to share what aspect you have of the 7 points of being culturally responsive within your pedagogy, and just see, what it means to you or what it may mean to the group. Who wants to start?
Reshaping the curriculum. So to me, I guess you do get different cohorts every year, and it's where you can start tailoring some of your teaching to a certain specific need. So I would say, like last year, I had a bunch of people, the first lot of YouTubers that wanted to come through, and there's no courses for kind of this modern YouTube self-vlogging kind of thing. But because there was such a lot of people that, 3 or 4 learners that were really passionate about that, it was like, okay, where can we work this into the course, and finding little ways to kind of work their interests into things, so into news stories and things like that, but a bit of teaching that kind of appealed to them. Just reshaping the curriculum due to some of those new needs and stuff, because a curriculum's designed and then it becomes antiquated quite quickly. Courses and programs are designed, and it's quite hard to change what's in those programs when things change fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's still room, especially formatively, maybe not with summative assessment, to change stuff, but formatively you can kind of appeal to them and try and reframe things that are not as better for them to learn in there.
Nice answer. Nice answer and nice example. Fantastic.
It's all working again now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was muddy all last year.
Was it? You're all over it this year.
So that's with the firing stuff.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Thank you.
Sugar.
Anybody else got one that they want to?
I'm sort of struggling with this one a bit.
Read it out so Rachel can hear.
Positive perspectives on parents and families. I sort of don't really quite know which way you want me to go with it. Whether you're saying, an example, I had a young fella that took to me like a father.
Yeah.
He came from a gang background, everything like that, and is now a leader in our community because he got completely away from the gang. Is that sort of that you're talking about type thing? But I've also got someone in my Taekwondo club that's got the most amazing parents you could ever imagine, and she's running absolutely amok now.
Right.
So I don't think that the family, yes, we're quick to blame families, and we're quick to encourage them, but I can't put a finger on it how we.
I think
I don't know. I'm lost.
It's
that
right. We've got quite a strong culture in New Zealand of including our families in the education process. So Rhea and I were talking 11 o'clock this morning, how you invite families.
And for meeting open classroom environment.
If we're also very much, within the Treaty of Waitangi, that, you've got that partnership. So, and also, if you wanted to bring somebody in, a family member into a meeting, you called a meeting with one of your learners and they wanted to bring a family member, then we welcome that as a Polytech because it keeps our learners safe and makes them feel.
And something that I think that's up on the Moodles, aren't they? Intercultural.
Yes.
So whānau ngātanga is where you are involving family whānau in the learning in the community. So we were going to do that today, but I think
we're running out of time. But I appreciate, and what I did hear you say as well, which I thought was really cool, that obviously you were giving that father figure to that boy that needed it. So that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Go to you. It's big. Right. Anybody else want to share something that they've got? Because there is more reading on this, so it's really, it's just thinking about diversity, who our learners are, what cultures do they identify with as we're thinking about our lesson design. This leads, if you go through and read aspects of Assessment 1, this is actually almost the first task within Assessment 1 that we've drawn on today, so you can take, some of this learning, thinking about who your learners are, thinking about, how I'm going to teach them as a group. What are the different aspects of the individuals? What are the cultures that I identify with? How do I ensure I meet all the needs of my learners when I'm thinking about learning design?
So just a quick question on that. How does that differ from fundamentals where we did that mind map of the same kind of stuff? Are you looking for a similar thing, or are you looking for us more to... I don't think we broke down universal versus group versus individual so much. So is that is kind of...
And what the progression is with learning design rather than fundamentals is you were teaching one lesson plan for fundamentals.
Okay.
Now you're going to be thinking about
a whole course.
If not a whole course, a whole chunk of that course.
Right.
So, or a whole course. Yeah, it depends on the level. Is it going to be mainly the assessments in the course? Is it going to be mainly the activities in that course? So it's really kind of having a think about what's one whole chunk of learning or bunch of learning that you need to redesign or would like to redesign.
So it's not lesson plans, it's kind of a bigger picture.
Could be lesson
timetable, if you like.
Yeah.
Could be lesson plans.
Could be
series.
Okay.
But it's like, how does it all fit within a course anyway?
Okay.
Because you don't just do something in isolation.
So lead into the assessment, what sort of skills you need to teach them in order to be able to reach that assessment.
And did Geordie go through the assessment with you? Probably not.
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, a little
okay,
bit.
And I think maybe Bronwyn, would be something looking at next week.
Yeah, so your homework is to look at the course outline, look at the assessments, make sure that you know what you're up against and what you're
bring those
towards.
questions next Friday.
And we can have a bit of a talk about that at the start, just to make sure everybody's clear about what's expected.
I think climbing next Friday.
rock climbing. Can we come with you and choose the rock?
Lessons from her.
Send from a higher level. Send any questions that you have through, but I think that's probably quite a good point to start at next week. Sorry, that was me.